Hi there, folks. This is Jay McNeal with the Be Doing Faith podcast. It is, what are we at? March 23rd. And I'm waiting to meet with Colbert Prosper. He's coming on now. I think he's actually been waiting for me, so I would not want to imply any responsibility for tardiness on anyone but me. It's been fun trying to get the right cameras hooked up and the background and everything. Colbert, can you hear me?
Yep.
There you are. So, well, I've just rushed back from the grocery store and want to swear never to go out into the world again. You are all the way outside of the country. Where are you at?
I am in Uganda.
Just around the corner.
Exactly.
Did you bring your cat with you?
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Why not?
So, all right. This is Lily. Lily apparently knows we went live. So, Be Doing Faith podcast. We're here to help people talk about their faith. We're going to have some guests on the show. Colbert and I are the co-hosts. How are things going in Uganda with your, is it a conference?
No. So what we do is we work with communities to create coalitions around public health and just a general advocacy around making good decisions and having policies and systems in a place where people are in an environment to make the best decisions for themselves. So that's what we do out here. So for us, we're doing a lot of training with grassroots leaders, organizers. They pretty much do what they do, and what we pretty much teach is how do you create a coalition, a collective of different groups, agencies, and organizations coming together and deciding this is the public health issue that we want to focus on, and this is how we're going to go about doing it. So that's what we're doing out here, and we do it in the United States as well and stuff like that. So
Awesome. I don't know how other people will be hearing us. Normally, I am the soft-spoken person, and your voice carries a little better than mine. I have a feeling I'm a little bit louder than you today, so if you can project a little, I don't know what your real full setting is, but I was laughing at the irony. This, and people will find out with the podcast, right? That Colbert will always be helping us stay focused and on track, and I will be the one who's constantly chasing a rabbit someplace else.
right.
So I couldn't help laugh at the cat that was just walking across the screen, and I know audio folks won't be able to see this at all, but the cat just laid down on the mouse. Can't quite get it in the camera. It's that's just funny. So that's awesome. The advocacy work and just talking about coalition building, you've got to know profoundly more than I would about the importance of having a breadth of relationships, doing all kinds of work.
Yeah. It's one of those things. So we work with, I couldn't tell you, probably work with every year. We probably work with 50 odd some communities, maybe more. When you include in the conferences that we work in hundreds of communities per year. And every community is different. Now, the issues, what they're experiencing might be the same, but how they show up locally is where the rubber meets the road. And you have to respect where people are, and you have to ask permission and working with folks. And I tell people what I bring is the experience. I've worked with the hundreds of communities. I can tell you what this community is doing. I can tell you what hasn't worked in a particular community, and kind of talk about it from a situational point. But when it comes to your community, when it comes to you doing what you're doing in your community, there's only so much I can tell you because that's your community. Um, I can tell you what the literature says. I can tell you what the research says. At the same time, it's whatever we do when it comes to these strategies and making sure that people have the agency to make the best decisions for themselves and for their health. It's co-creation, um, and so today was interesting because um, you we were so I'm in Uganda. One of the national languages is English, but people mostly speak Ugali. So it's one of those things is um, really which language is going to really resonate with people, and then me saying, well, it seems like to me English is going to take the back seat. So taking a back seat as a facilitator and really depending on our partner who works in the communities who's from here to really take the lead in supporting. So it's so contextual. Um, it's so contextual. So you gotta be you gotta be ready for whatever.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that will apply with our conversations here too. And yeah, I'm trying to flash back. Like you and I met like 7 or 8 years ago, right? And you've just got all that much more experience working in diverse communities, right? That may not even have a similar like paradigm structure in their head, right, about how they do things and what their religion is and what their beliefs are. Just everything that goes into what we all call normal to our own space. And I sometimes have trouble like having enough patience and extending enough listening ear, right? And so I am really confident that those experiences that you bring and the skills that you've really developed are going to be so useful in this space and in that kind humans universe and anywhere we're trying to host conversation and making space for that there's not just one way of thinking, one way to be. That's going to be really helpful. Thanks for sharing a little bit about what you're doing there. And folks watching or listening, we're going to increasingly try to find access and ways for the substance of what Colbert is doing with his work and in his personal life, as much as he's willing to share. I think that we've got a real artery, not just some capillary side vein to a beautiful resource and lots of content and conversations that are able to be had and talking about the literature and the resource and what all of those things offer to us. So I mean, something that comes to mind just thinking about that. So there's all of this research out there, right? And people talk about how the information and data and different kinds of surveys and can be manipulated, right? So there's this huge distrust of information, and I think a healthy skepticism is just that, healthy, right? So how do you hold that intention with sort of the importance of a relationship, right? Like you've got to be able to listen and connect while you show up with all this data, right? How do you carry those things together? Is there any sort of like principle or wisdom or something that you've observed or put into practice?
Um,
Is my
I was on.
question clear at all?
No, it is. It is.
Okay.
I'm trying.
Okay.
I'm trying to get the. So I was on a plane, and I was actually coming from visiting family, and I was reading a book on organizational development and really thinking about how we manage this whole new era of work and how we work. So just reading some of the leading scholars in that. And I was next to this gentleman and we just hit it off, started talking. And so he's a salesman. Most of his career was selling devices and medical devices to doctors and hospitals and everything like that. And he said something to me in a way in which, hold on. He said, like, there's really no difference between my device and the competitor. Um, he's like, yeah, there's some difference, but no major difference. And he was like, the reason why people buy my stuff is because I've created a relationship with them. They trust me. Um, they enjoy the things I bring into the space when I interact with them. Um, and he said it so clear and to the point. And so for me, it's nobody wants to hear a talking head off bat. Like, and when I go into a new community, I'm not going to tell them like, well, your risk factors are this, your protective factors are this, and these is the sociological domains when it comes to behavior change and influencing. Like, they want to know. They want to know, am I there for them? They want to know, do I care about what they're saying? They want to know, am I going to give them respect and give them the space for them to be who they are and to show up? And if I'm going to take the back seat, like, now, once I've established that relationship, once they know that I'm there with good intention, and however they define that, because their context is theirs, but I come off genuine enough where they're like, okay, I'm willing to listen to this guy and or be willing to share with him, and then I can begin to share what I know in comparison to what they're experiencing. Um, but people don't want to hear. I mean, yeah, I mean, people want to know that you care about them or for them and what they care about before they're willing to listen. And that's what I try to do, and that's what my company tries to do. How do we build that relationship and that rapport? Then we can talk about all that other stuff. So I
Do
think
you
that's critical.
do you try to? Is there sort of like when you do educational programs or anything? Do you say they need to be more than a day or more than so that you have enough time? Is there sort of a minimum amount of time where you're like, if it's 3 hours, there's no point in us traveling all the way there because we're not going to establish a real relationship for, you're not going to trust us for an hour and a half or whatever it is. Is that
Uh,
more of a gut feel?
I mean, I think people know. We've been doing this for a while, and I think in the first 30 minutes, people will decide, am I going with this? Am I not going with this? I think what we try to do is at the very most be like, I'll listen. If you're there, if I got you there, I'm fine. What I mean, you ain't gotta like me. You don't have to think whatever I say is gospel. But in the first 30 minutes, if I can get you to a place where like, yeah, I'm willing to listen, then we're cool. Then we'll go from there,
Right.
and then we'll build from there. But
I
Yeah,
do
that's
think
that's.
that that threshold spot is a place in all I can talk about, right, is US culture. I don't travel as much. I just complained about going to the grocery store. Um, so, but it has felt for decades for me. Um, I'm precisely halfway to 100 now. And that with the willingness to listen, to actually entertain uh, a new thought, or um, if that does not exist, there's no point in kind of conversing or debating about a whole bunch of different complex stuff. Like, I am happy to like talk and like try and persuade you of something, or even listen, right? Like at some depth. But if we come at something and we know we already disagree, um, and you're clearly not willing to listen or move, like I feel like I'm always willing to change my mind. Um, that is very important to me. That I do not want to hold on to any kind of false truth. I don't want to fool myself. I don't want to live a lie. Um, that to me would be like just the worst coming to the end of life or a relationship or anything. Like, really? Like, it was just, I did it all wrong. And I'll say within Christianity, one of the things that concerns me a lot is like a lot of the structure of it is often the fear-based piece that, behave this way, do this thing, or you will go to hell. Um, and so it feels like being kind and loving, like loving is complex, even good is complex. But um, if I have to be mean or hurt people in order to get into heaven, um, like that's not a good deal for me. I I will not take that deal. I will not make that deal. And uh, I just, it doesn't make sense to me to be hurtful um, in order to get into heaven when there's really no guarantee about that, right? That's the deal that some human has put on the table and is offering me and says, here's what you've got to do if you want to get into heaven. I know God. Here's how you can know God too. Like that's a dangerous offer to me. Um, so I hope that people are willing and open to discussing all sorts of stuff, being open-minded. But that's one that I feel like happens all the time: the fear and shame-driven deals that are made. Is that do you see that in? You and I are both Christians. My world has gone into Unitarian Universalism, is where I take in my Christianity. But do you see that as well?
I mean, yeah, yeah, you see it. Yeah, and it's like, who does it serve? Does it serve you and your mental model, your paradigm? And if that's what you're about, cool. you know, if you find fulfillment in that, serving your own paradigm, um, doing and saying and showing up in spaces that reaffirms what you think and believe, that's how you want to live. Who am I to say anything else? Um, but to be in a space where you're always open for feedback, that's just harder. That's just a harder place to be. Um, and then being open to the feedback and shifting what you do, what you say, or even how you look at the world. That's a lot scarier to do. So whatever floats your boat.
Well,
You
and I think
know?
that that's okay, right? As long as it's not hurtful to other people. But
Hmm.
when the arrangement is to be hurtful, um, that that's where it's problematic, because they're not extending kindness and goodness and love, I would say. Um, the the wrinkle that is thrown in, I think, with my experience in Christianity, is that they can do anything in the name of love, right? And say, like, this is just me being a good parent. It doesn't feel loving to you right now, because I'm not giving you what you want. I'm not telling you what you want to hear. I'm telling you, like a parent tells a child that they can't have dessert before dinner or something. And so, like that's where it's hard to stand by and watch, because that it's being experienced as unloving. And I feel like I'm sort of talking in abstraction. It might be easier to like take an example. Like, actually, I just saw in the news today something about. I wish I could remember which country it was, but they are sort of doubling down on their anti-homosexuality laws and whatnot, and the president has to either veto or sign an anti-gay piece of legislation. And right, and so a lot of parts of the world and parts of including the United States have versions of Christianity that are anti-homosexuality, and say that you can't have same-sex relationship that's loving and honorable to God. And that hurts people, right? That hurts gay people. It pressures them to try to behave like straight people when they're not straight people. And it's that kind of thing that I find really difficult, which pushes me all the way towards back to what I had mentioned to you, kind of wanting to talk about a little bit today, was just I called it the authority of Scripture. Like, how do we think about the Bible? And we'll have guests on to all of our watchers and listeners that will talk to us about different religions besides Christianity. But for Christianity, I know that a lot of where our disagreements come all over the place, like whatever in politics and everywhere. If I push them all back far enough and keep probing and the questioning and say, so why? Okay, why that? Okay, well, they answer and they say, okay, well, why do you believe that? Well, okay, why do you believe that? If you keep pushing those conversations back far enough, it very, very often goes back to a theological perception and understanding about the Bible and its authority. And so in this example, people perceive the Bible as being saying homosexuality is a sin or some sort of perversion. And at the moment, I would just, to keep it brief and not go into something phenomenally complex, is just to say that there was no word for homosexual when the Bible was written. Like that is an invention within the last, I'm guessing, 70 or 80 years or something. And so to have the word homosexual in Scripture doesn't even make sense. There was no understanding in that era, way back when, of a same-sex, God-honoring relationship or commitment. At least with that, certainly with that term. I'm not listening to another audiobook that talks about the history of literally of sexuality. And so that's kind of spinning my brain just a little bit. But we think about the structure of family as like husband, wife, 2.5 kids and a dog, and picket fence and whatnot from our sort of 1950s image. And when I read the Bible, I don't see that.
That's Protestant culture.
Yeah. Because like you don't see that in the Bible, which is always cracks me up. So the piece about what I want to really say about the authority of Scripture is it's very important to me, to the point where like I've had a couple of times where I've invited people to read the entire Bible cover to cover in a number of days, like 90 days or 120 days. And like had some, real conversations. Now that's a very different experience than it is to do a deep dive into a couple of passages or, to take a month and go through a book or something. But that often the people who declare to be like Bible-based churches are not as concerned with, as I feel like I am, about the integrity of Scripture and the translations and which translations have done a fair job of translating, right? Because we trust the translation. We have to trust the translation. But they're not all equal. They're different people, different groups, and not all with the same integrity making these translations. And there is literally no original text, not Hebrew, Arabic, Greek. I think we have copies of copies. So it's very challenging. And I also feel like, despite where it feels like sometimes people think like I'm trying to cast shade on the integrity of Scripture, given all of the potential limitations, that there is an immense amount of consistency and reliability to what's there, considering how it has come into our hands or before our eyes or into our ears, however we are experiencing it.
So when you were when we were texting about what we were talking about, and
can you just talk a little louder?
Just thinking about what I can add to the conversation from my point of view, from my perspective. Authority of Scripture, like what does that mean? And I sat back and thought about it. And I was like, what if we looked at the Bible as a guide by a transformative leader to the masses? So using transformational leadership as a way to think about the authority of the Bible, to think about what writers were trying to do. And so with transformational leader, it's a person who envisions something greater, something better. But not everybody's there yet. And so the transformational leader has to attend to meet people where they're at, their individual needs, and supporting them and building that trust and that relationship among them, and then begin to like intellectually and emotionally engage people in a way like, oh, there might be something else. This could be different. This is only the beginning of what it actually could be, right? And a transformational leader gets people there and then begins to try to inspire motivation for what things could be or look like. Um, for what that for me, organizational development, what that organization could look like, or what could society or your life looks like. Um, and then from there, it's like, all right, influencing and inspiring, giving people the tools to make that a reality. And so if you look at the Bible from a transformational leadership theory, it really cuts through all the unnecessary fat. And it's like, at the end of the day, what are we trying to be? What are we trying? How are we trying to show up in society? How do we become better? How do we live on the edges of our comfort zone to create a society that's more inclusive and welcoming and loving, as you talked about? So, like, if you think about it from that way, like all this other stuff is kind of like, nah, how do we get there? And what do you need to get there? What do you need? What do we need to be in a place where everyone feels seen and everybody's loved and people feel reconciled and whole? I didn't freeze. I stopped talking.
Mine is just trying to think, because where the questions I want to ask, I'm like, they're like go down into the weeds. And I think that the idea of looking at the Bible as transformational leaders and what they were hoping for and trying to accomplish, it may be important to, who do you have in mind? Is it a breadth of people, or is the transformational leader God, or more specifically, Jesus?
Well, I mean, I would even say it's the writers, right? Because they, whoever the writer is, whichever book of the Bible you're at, they're like inspiring for something.
Right. There's a goal, right?
Right. And what it is, and I've read most of the Bible, but don't quote me on it. But for the most part, it's like what's happening right now is not where it's at. Like there's something better.
We haven't accomplished what the writers were aiming for.
Right. So whichever book you read, that writer's like is selling. Well, I'm not use the word selling, but it's pretty much drawing a picture
Yeah.
of what things can be like from, when you think about the first book of the Bible with Moses, or you think about the Gospels. It's like meeting where you at, and then like how do we corral you and motivate you for something better?
Right. And I really kind of love the word transformational. Sometimes I don't know, it scares me to use it or implement it or aspire to be transformed or to be transforming. It seems like a really big ask, but it really has a lot to do with
It
what
is.
I'd said before about just being open to change. And there's, again, I run into a lot of people, they don't necessarily express this, but my experience of them is often, take me or leave me. This is who I am. If you don't like it, peace out. And that doesn't give us a lot of room to grow or go. But being willing to learn and discover. I often think of the word expansive. I wish that had a more stickiness to it, like it was a better word. Because I always want to be learning and growing. And I think of Unitarian Universalism, I often want to use that word because I feel like it's always asking us to be more inclusive, to learn more, to consider more, right? And there are other times where I experience, and as I'm sure other people experience me this way, is like really stubborn sometimes. But even my own people, I can experience as like immovable. Like, nope, this is how we do it. It's like, wait a second, we criticize other people for being that way. And there you have the hypocrisy of any group of people. I always feel like that should be on the marquee of every church. Like, hypocrites here, hypocrites welcome. Yes, we know it. Come on in. Yeah. I really like the transformational leader piece. I think that's something I want to keep thinking about. So keep bringing it back up. You'd be like, bookmark.
But to your point, Jay, like this is people talking about this is how we've always done it, and this is how we're gonna keep doing it. Um, I'm of the thought that think and believe what you want. Just be true to yourself and other people. And so I work with communities, nonprofits, organizational institutions, for profits. So we're a management consulting firm. So we work with organizations, like people coming together to create this organization, inputs, the things that they need in order for them to do what they do, and outputs is what they create and or give to the world in whatever industry that they're in. And organizations and people we say that we're gonna keep doing what we're doing. Yo, like if you're not doing well, that mind frame does not help you. Like, because the world, I mean, the only thing that's constant, or the thing that's almost always constant, is change. And if you're not willing to change and adapt, then you're just not gonna be successful as to somebody or an organization that does. Um, I mean, you can tell me better. You can tell me better than I know for what I know. The churches.
Apparently the applause effect will keep going until I shut it off. So for our listeners, we are I found the sound effect.
Thank you, Jay. But the point that I'm trying to make before you make another sound effect, or how well churches are doing now. So much has changed. Are the churches that are saying this is how we do it, this is how we're always doing it, are they thriving? You tell me.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there before I was able to go there. Right. So my life for the last, as long as I've known you, right, has been trying to help the church. Well, basically help the public connect with faith leaders, and faith leaders of congregations or not. But right, there are all these faith leaders out there, and they're trying to answer their call to serve people, and not just in Christianity, right, but all over the place. And there are people on the internet and everywhere just trying to find a faith leader because they have a crisis or a question or a task. Like they're a spiritual person, but they don't have a congregation or a pastor, and they want one at that moment. And so they like go to the internet and search for a faith leader, but they don't want all the institutional baggage that's why they don't belong to a church. They've been hurt by a church or a faith leader, or somebody they love has been hurt by a faith leader or a faith community, and it's not worth what it costs them to be there. So there's a lot of change that I've been asking for, and I get a lot of resistance and doubt from faith leaders. It's very hard to bring them on board with anything that's new because everybody wants to do it the way that it's always been done, even though the way it's been done is failing.
I mean, I think people. I think.
I
Yeah,
was
I
just gonna
think.
say, I'm like throwing them a lifeboat or life preserver, and they're like, "No, thanks, I'm good."
Yeah, I feel like, especially in my work, when it comes to change, whether it be the market, whether it be a pandemic, you know, um, change is more about in the way we approach it. It's more about you than the actual change itself. Um, and so if people are struggling with change, then where's that stem from? Where's it come from for you? What's coming up for you if you're having a hard time with change? What's that mean for you? And I think that's a better conversation to have than to talk about how much things are different. Like, how do you deal with it? And all of this is hard, and we're all doing the best that we can. That's what I like to believe. But like you said,
Mm-hmm.
you can't impose. You can't impose on people, on other people. I mean, you can, but I don't think it's advised.
Yeah, it ends up not being very effective. One of the things that I asked about the authority of Scripture because it always gives me flashbacks to Old Testament class where, and we would literally, whatever book we were reading, we wouldn't get to finish every book, but the professor would just read through the passages. Like, we would just start at the beginning of a book and we would talk about things. We would stop when we needed to talk about something. And, we stopped basically every sentence. And I remember, there's all these moments where professors just like looking at us and we're like, what? We didn't hear it. What? He's like, you didn't hear that. Like, do you guys, we're kind of numb to Scripture. We think we know what it says. So we read right over the top of something. Like a classroom full of seminary students will read right over the top of something that should like make our head spin and whiplash. But we won't catch it. The peculiarity of what we just read. But one of the things that I remember him calling out in particular, and this is Dr. Mark Biddle, anybody that wants to, I should give credit where credit's due, but I remember at one point debating about who wrote a particular book, and I don't remember what book it was. It was Old Testament because he's an Old Testament professor, and I feel like it was, within the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. But there were some expressions or arguments made about who wrote it and why it was impossible for the person that, like, it's actually impossible for Moses to have written this based on these facts that are in the book. But then the professor just says, does it matter? And I've never forgotten that moment, just because it was, speaking of paradigms shattered, right? Like, of course it matters who says a thing, right? Like, does Colbert say it and I trust Colbert, or is it some Yahoo that I know not to trust? They lie all the time. But the next thing out of his mouth, with nobody even said anything, but he's like, sometimes our enemies tell the truth, like say things that are true. And so like, no longer could I dispense of a statement because it was made by somebody I don't trust. I now have to evaluate what's said or written based on whether it's true on its own. Can it stand on its own? And that's got so many layers to it to me. I just feel like, does that strike you as at least understanding why somebody else would find it as shocking as it hit me in the moment? I doubt anybody else in the class probably remembers it. I hope they remember the lesson, but I remember like the 30 seconds that took up. Yeah. What do you mean if God didn't write this? Right? Like, forget Moses. Who wrote the Bible? God did. Well, what if God didn't write it? Does that change anything? Whoa, the ultimate author.
Yeah, it's I want to make sure I get this right. So my area of focus is political science. And I remember in political science we're reading about Socrates and all that stuff and all the philosophy he was talking about, and then to be like, yeah, he wrote nothing. He never wrote anything down. It was his mentee, Plato, who did.
Right.
Like, what? I just want to make sure I got that right. Fact checking.
Yeah. I think you got it right, but I remember that same sort of phenomena, right? Discovering that.
Yeah, I got it right. And it's like, well, I mean, they like because especially and yeah, I mean, Western education, we put a lot of emphasis on the Romans and everything like that, and so there's this buildup of Socrates, of who he is and who he was, and how does his teaching still relate today, and so you're like, oh, this guy, he was that guy, and then being like, well, he didn't write anything down, his student did, Plato, and I'm like, well, I mean, Plato was tired and he got it down wrong.
Right.
Like, what if he missed a class? Like, I'm going off this guy who's his mentee. I mean, like, and so I remember having that, like, yo, who Socrates was built up to be for me in that class, is he still that person because Plato wrote his teachings, right? And I was just like, well, I mean, his teachings kind of stand on their own. Both of their teaching kind of stand on their own. So
yeah, because you want to just like, you're like, or Socrates, I'm reading, I'm hearing all this good stuff, we're doing all these lessons on Socrates, man, it was profound, and you wrestle with all these questions, and then you're like, oh, and Plato wrote it all because Socrates didn't write it down, but, we're trusting Plato, and it's like, delete, pitch out everything I learned in the last 2 weeks about Socrates, because you changed the source. You just totally discredited the source.
You change the
And
source.
like to go all nerdy, right? Like postmodernism stuff, right? Like which nobody's talked about for the last like 10 years probably. But I feel like is a very real thing. Because postmodernists like will trust you until you lie to them, and then you're done. Like the carpet, like they will just drop you like a bad habit, right? Like you're just going to be done. And so I think of that all the time. I don't stand in the pulpit and preach a lot, but I imagine a lot of times just sort of, you know, anybody kind of under 40, 35 for sure, coming into a church, trying to give them a chance, give a religion a chance again. Like I doubted them for a while, but I miss the community, and they come in and the pastor's good for like 5 minutes, and then they say something that
You're like,
hold water. And they might as well, like the millennial or postmodernist, could be a millennial, but postmodernist might as well have gotten up and walked out of the church because you just lost them.
That could be a thought piece. Millennials are postmodernists, or millennial postmodernists. Millennials of postmodernists.
Millennials, postmodernists go to church for a hot minute. Right? Like,
That's it.
don't call them postmodernists, call them hot minute modernists. Yeah, but they're cool with story. Like you can tell your own story and there's no lying in it, right? Like you're allowed to believe what you believe. You're even probably allowed to embellish a little bit, but because you're not in your own storytelling, you're not pushing anything,
right?
Explicitly most of the time, right? This is what I believe. This is what I think. It's what I've based on what I've seen, read, heard.
And people get what they want out of it. You tell them a story about
right.
whatever you're going through, and they get whatever they want from it. So,
truth. Do I have a truth sound effect? I have a gasp. Wait, there are 2 champagne glasses. Looks like it should be clinking, but it says chant. So I have to see what it.
No, please.
Okay. So
it's like countdown.
The wine glasses don't make sense at all. It's a chant. Good to know. Yeah. I don't even know what I was saying.
I mean, do most postmodernists do?
Oops. Yeah.
I
Can
see
you see
it.
that on the screen now? Join Kind Humans at bekindhumans.com. Yeah. And that's my banner. I can do a ticker tape. I can do all kinds of stuff. So for those that are listening to the audio, it said you can join Kind Humans Network. It just said join us at bekindhumans.com. This Colber and I have got this whole universe set up where people can come ask questions, and we're trying to populate it with diverse faith leaders. This goes back to what I've been working on for the last 8 years or so, trying to connect faith leaders and the general public. But it's hard to get faith leaders to do something they haven't done before, that they don't have a model for. So you'll at least have me for whatever that's worth. That deserves a sound effect.
It does.
I don't have booze.
Nah, far from it. You're amazing, Jay. You're amazing. All right, bro. Yeah, I'm running out of gas. It's
okay.
I've been up since 6 a.m. and I don't know what time it is here. It's almost like 7 or 8. And that's dinner time, bro.
I'm glad you said something because it's been longer than I realized. We make no promises about what the length of these episodes will be. When they get to be this length, we'll probably bust them into two pieces, so they're a little more consumable, bite-sized. Not quite bite-sized. We'll work on bite-sized though. We did for this podcast. This episode was broadcast live inside of the Kind Humans universe. The whole podcast is there. And so feel free to join us there to watch live. And I'll figure out how to watch the comments so that people can interact and we can actually bring guests on the show as well, like from the audience. That sounds a little bit dangerous to me. So we'll figure out a way to manage and screen so we don't get, what would it be? Not exactly trolled, but a little security screening. Yeah. All right, so it's the Be Doing Faith podcast. I need to upload our little trailer music. You probably haven't heard it yet. I posted 4 episodes. Oops. I don't know what that alarm was about, but everything is supposed to be on Do Not Disturb.
We're filming here.
Right, and yes. So, have you seen our published 4 episodes, Colbert? You've been busy while I've been publishing.
No. I looked them up. Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Okay,
I appreciate you.
All right. Well, they're out there, world. So feel free to consume, and we'll get this one posted ASAP, so that everybody else can join us. And we'll, as I keep promising, as things go forward, this is like a workshop thing. We waited a little while to start making the episodes, but if we wait too long until all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, everything's like perfect, and we know what all the component pieces are going to be, then it'll never happen. And so we're going to do this in like a workshop format. So we're going to learn as we go, and we appreciate you being with us as we learn. So feel free to give us feedback, make suggestions, topics, ideas, questions for future shows, guests we might bring on, people you want to hear from, and we'll do as much as we can.
I think I'm going to have to start traveling with one of those ring lights, so that way we can still look good and professional no matter where I'm at.
Well,
is that a small one?
Yeah.
How small? I like that. Can you send me the?
Was it who's
Tony Stark's Iron Man?
Iron Man. Thank you. I got the
John
ring
Wick.
for my
John Wick is coming out this weekend.
All right.
I think it's coming out tomorrow.
Yeah, I got lighting issues going on, but like I said, the guy on the plane. I'm really glad this came up. We can talk more about it later, but he said his product isn't much different than his competitors, and it's sort of like people don't buy from me because of the features that I offer in particular. And that rings true with me. I love the Kind Humans universe and the features that are there, and they're really impressive to me, and they're always upgrading and doing more and doing more and doing more. And we just like restructured the whole thing. In December, the massive upgrades came out in December. And so December, January, I was doing major changes there. This is March, by the way, depending when you're listening to this, March 2023. I had to check the calendar for the year. Don't come to us for the features. Like, we're going to be doing really cool stuff, and it's mostly going to be about the people and the content and relationships. So come spend time with us, get to know us. We want to get to know you. We want to support you on your own spiritual journey. You don't ever need to agree with us. You don't have to mirror what we believe. We want you to find what supports you and lights you up and makes the world work for you. And Colbert's destination was about like it matters how we do it, right, Colbert? Like what it looks like in the world, right? And so listen to his episode. He just did a solo episode. I think it's episode 3, and it's really good stuff. And to hear the ways that we're trying to support you. All right. Get some sleep, friend.
I'm looking forward to it. Also looking forward to dinner.
Dinner?
It's good seeing you, man.
You too. You're going to have dinner. I'm going to have lunch.
Enjoy
and we will
yourself.
be fed.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Colbert.
Take care.
Bye. Bye, everyone.